We're joined by Alan Dershowitz, equally famous in his end of the law, former defense attorney for Simpson, professor at Harvard Law. He's got a book out recently called Reasonable Doubt. So we'll try to go step by step. We won't overtalk each other. These are two very vibrant, bright personalities. On Vince's point so far, was this a terrible prosecution, Alan?
It was. I agree with much of what Vince said. As you might expect from a brilliant prosecutor, his book is a powerful brief. But it's a brief, and it presents his perspective. And in fact, when Darden comes on tomorrow night, I wish you would ask him what I tried to ask him when I called in the show a few weeks ago. Why aren't you willing to debate me? Why aren't you willing to debate Vince about how poor your prosecutorial job is? It's very easy for Darden to write a book and appear on a show and have people glorify him, but he hasn't answered the questions. Why he did the various things that Vince and I...
agree. Terrible prosecution.
Terrible, terrible prosecution. Now, where I think Vince, with due respect, falls down is he brilliantly makes a powerful case against O.J. Simpson. But by the same logic, I think you can make a very powerful case, whether Simpson was guilty or innocent, that the police, particularly Van Adder and Furman, who honestly believed that Simpson did it, that they may well have not only committed perjury, relevant perjury, but also tampered with evidence at the trial
So
itself.
the public understands this. If that occurred, does that mean he didn't do it and the jury has to vote not guilty?
No, actually, Vince in his book says, if you can prove a frame-up, that constitutes a reasonable doubt. Doesn't mean he's innocent, but a jury is not going to find a person guilty if they are convinced there was a frame-up. Now, Vince and I disagree about what a frame-up means. He says in his book, a frame-up means only convicting a man you believe to be innocent. We can use whatever word we want. What I think happened here is that two police officers who honestly and deeply believed, in Vince's own words, knew that Simpson was guilty, whether or not that's true, decided that he was going to get acquitted, like many other people thought, and that some help was needed. And what they did is they lied and committed perjury and may well have tampered with evidence, and the jury believed that. And that's where Vince falls down. As a brilliant prosecutor, I think he should make the case as powerfully against the police officers as he has against O.J. Simpson.
Alan, let me ask you this question. I think you have a reasonable doubt. Have you said that you have a reasonable doubt of Simpson's guilt?
Right.
How can you have a reasonable doubt, Ellen, when Simpson's blood is found at the murder scene?
Well, that's a very good question. And frankly, I have to tell you, if you were prosecuting the case, and if you had introduced the blood of Simpson at the murder scene, but had not introduced the two most powerful pieces of evidence, which were also the most suspicious pieces of evidence, namely the sock, which had the blood not only of O.J. Simpson, but of Nicole Brown, and also the glove, which had the blood of Nicole Brown, Ron Goldman, and O.J. Simpson, there would have been a stronger case for prosecution. Let me tell you what the defense theory of the case was.
I don't think you're answering the question.
Oh, let me answer the question.
Okay, how do you have a reasonable doubt when Simpson's blood is found at the murder scene?
Let me explain to you what the two defense theories were for that. Number one, Simpson was at that scene many, many times. In the weeks before the murders, he was there repeatedly because, remember, Nicole Brown was sick and he was there taking care of the kids, taking care of the dogs. As he has said, he repeatedly bled there. He played with the dogs. He played with the bikes, with the golf clubs. At one point, he got his finger stuck in the car. The blood was old, brown, and degraded. That's theory number one.
Okay,
number two, we know...
Let me talk about that one. Okay. You've done quite a bit of talking, Alan.
Go ahead.
And I think I should talk a little bit, too. I don't want to interrupt you, but I mean, you've done quite a bit of talking.
Go ahead.
Who told you that he bled at the Bundy premises, Alan?
Well,
who told you that?
He did, of course.
Oh, he did. Now, O.J. Simpson. Now, that really is someone that you can rely on.
Well, you've asked about the defense
I take his word over the Pope's, okay? O.J. Simpson told you that. All right. He didn't testify to that.
He didn't testify.
Okay. So you have no evidence that he ever bled at Bundy on a previous occasion. It's wild speculation on your part. Number two.
No, it's not wild speculation.
Number two, in the statement that he gave to the police the day after the murders, they asked him, the last time you were at Bundy, which was a week earlier, did you bleed or cut yourself? The answer was no. That was a week earlier. A further point, Dennis Fung testified at the trial, Alan, I'm sure you know.
Of course.
That the blood that he found at that scene, the 5 blood drops, were fresh blood. They were bright red.
But he was wrong.
Wait a while.
But he was wrong.
Oh, he's wrong. He was wrong. He's there.
No, but he was wrong. He was discredited on cross-examination. It was brown. No, yes, he was. It was brown, discolored blood.
You're talking about some of the other blood that he collected later in the day had turned dark brown. But at the time that he picked up these 5 blood drops, they were bright red. They transferred easily, he said. He never changed his testimony on that. They transferred easily to the cotton swatch they hadn't set yet.
And you're relying on Dennis Bond?
Wait a while. Other blood that he hadn't picked up until later in the day had turned dark brown. But Ellen, wait a while. Even assuming arguendo that Simpson may have bled at some previous occasion, okay? Certainly you wouldn't expect, Ellen, even the most gullible person on the face of this earth to believe that of all the places on the premises, O.J. Simpson just happened to bleed, Ellen, immediately to the left of the killer's bloody shoe prints, leaving the bodies.
Let me get to the two other theories.
Hold on. I got to get a break. Hold on. I'm going to make Mr. Dershowitz. A very good point, Vince. I'm going to have Alan respond to that as we go on.
Before we go on to other ones, I want to nail Alan down here on this point. Did you believe in
the nailing?
I'm prepared.
We're both doing very well. We'll be back with Mr. Bugliosi. His book is Outrage. Alan Dershowitz, author of Reasonable Doubts. They're two of the best. I'm just taking it in with all the rest of you there. We'll be right back.
Me 60 seconds to make my point. Remember this fact. We now have learned something new in the last few days. Van Adder not only carried around O.J. Simpson's blood sample for 3 hours in an unauthorized manner, took it with him to O.J. Simpson's house, and, at least according to the sworn testimony, as you acknowledge in your book, 1.5 centiliters of that could not be accounted for. Second, we learned on Friday... No, let me finish. We learned on Friday, through criminalist Gary Singler, that a remarkable thing happened. Van Adder went down to the coroner's office and picked up just two pieces of evidence, samples of Nicole Brown's blood and samples of Ron Goldman's blood, so that Van Adder carried with him in his personal possession, unsupervised, the blood of all three participants, which eventually found its way onto socks and onto the glove. And so, obviously, the jury could easily infer from that evidence might have been planted even at the crime scene. And finally, one more point. Finally, you know there was evidence in the case that when Simpson's blood and the vial was on the criminalist's desk, the criminalist opened the blood vial in this manner, thereby creating the possibility that Simpson's own blood may have fallen into the blood found at the scene, mixed with degraded blood, and caused a false positive DNA for that particular blood.
Alan, I think that we'll achieve a lot more in all deference to you if we take one point at a time, okay?
Happy to do it.
Because you raised about 5 points.
Well,
I can handle all five. But wait a while. Wait a while. You cavalierly left the last point we were talking about. It was fresh blood at the scene, so it wasn't blood of his on a prior occasion.
You're missing the point.
Wait a while. Number two, are you suggesting that if he did bleed on a prior occasion, that he just happened to bleed immediately to the left of the killer's bloody shoe prints? You don't want to talk about that.
I am going to talk about
that.
But
the reason you don't want to talk about that, Alan, is because he cannot be innocent with his blood at the murder scene. He cannot do it. And you want to talk about other things, Alan.
Well, if it's his blood, and if it was planted, it was placed there that night by him, and if it was new blood, and if it wasn't mixed by the cesspool of corruption that the L.A. lab was, then you're absolutely right. But there were doubts, and the jury was right to have a reasonable doubt.
Wait a while, because the jury came back with a not guilty verdict does not mean that they were right, Alan. Okay. Now we'll take it to the next point. You have not satisfied me at all. I don't think you've satisfied anyone else that if he had bled on a prior occasion, it would be too much to ask even the most gullible person on the face of this earth to believe that he just happened to bleed 5 times directly, immediately to the left of the killer's bloody shoe print. You haven't satisfied me.
There are two other possible interpretations of that blood.
Now let's talk about another. Wait a while. Let's talk about the other point that you raised about the contamination.
Yeah.
All right. Even your colleagues, Ellen, who elevated audacity to symphonic and operatic levels, even they, let's italicize those words, did not allege in their summation that the LAPD planted drops of Simpson's blood directly to the left of the killer's shoe prints. Here's what they allege. I'm going to address myself to the very point that you raised, okay? It's going to take a little while. Just bear with me. Here's what they alleged. They alleged that those 5 blood drops at the murder scene, because of degradation, they lost all of their DNA, okay? Later on at the LAPD, you mentioned this, when Colin Yamauchi got a tiny dot of Simpson's blood from his reference vial on his glove, which he immediately discarded in a nearby trash can. He testified to that. There were no flies on the wall to say, no, you're not telling the truth. He's the only one. And if he's honest enough to tell this, that he got blood on the glove, then he's honest enough to tell the whole story. So he gets this little tiny dot of blood on his glove, immediately discards the blood in a nearby trash can, okay? And the defense theory, this is what Scheck argued, that miraculously this tiny dot of blood on the glove in the trash can somehow cross-contaminated with the 5 blood drops.
No, that's not what he argued.
Yeah, that's exactly what he argued.
Break. We'll come right back. We'll be right back.
I want to finish this now. I want to finish this point.
We'll come right back. Don't go away.
Other evidence, completely independent of the planted evidence to prove guilt, then they have to come back with a verdict of guilty. All right.
And then you have to charge the police officers with planting.
That's right.
Let me just read from Vince's book. Vince will like me to read from his book. If the jury buys the police conspiracy frame-up argument, the verdict will have to be not guilty. This is what you say.
If they buy if he was framed for the murders, but that's not what he said. He says if they planted some evidence.
That's what I said.
If they framed him completely,
all right,
of course.
finish your point, Vince.
Of course he's innocent if they framed him completely.
All right, Vince.
All right. So Scheck argued, and I'm precise in my book, I quote him verbatim in the book, Scheck argued that this tiny dot of blood, about 1/8 of an inch in diameter, on the glove in the trash can, miraculously cross-contaminated with the 5 Bundy blood drops. The problem with that is, number one, Scheck didn't have a spec to support what he was saying, number one. Number two, at the time that Yamauchi got this tiny dot of blood on his glove, the 5 blood drops were on cotton swatches on top of a table 15 feet away. Each one of them was enclosed and protected within paper bindles, which were themselves enclosed within coin envelopes. So there could not have been cross-contamination. That would have been impossible. So what that left your colleagues with then, Alan, who were in the courtroom, was the plain contamination theory. But for anyone to buy into that theory, Alan, they have to buy the preposterous proposition that these 5 blood drops at the scene, who were identified by DNA as belonging to Simpson, didn't belong to Simpson. They belonged to someone else. The other person is the true killer. Let's call him X right now. X.
Or the victim. Or the victims.
No, this was not the victim's blood.
No, we don't know. If it's degraded, you don't know whose blood it is. Remember that Dr. Henry Lee...
But it wasn't degraded.
But remember
an RFLP test was taken...
Let Alan respond now, then hold it.
No,
hold it, Vince, hold it. I'll decide that.
Remember that Dr. Henry Lee supported the defense theory. Remember also that part of the defense theory was that in opening up the tube, some of it may have sprayed. And remember the defense theory was that Yamauchi may not have been telling the whole truth. But I want to throw something back at you if I can, Vince. Vince, I want to compare the evidence against Simpson, which you very masterfully put in your book, with the evidence that I have in my book against the 2 police officers, Furman and particularly Van Adder. Give me 30 seconds to make my point. Van Adder first.
Can I talk about the contamination theory first?
Let me do this first, and then we'll get to that.
Hold on.
Let me get to this first, and then we'll give you your chance. Remember that Van Adder lies to the jury when he says that I no more suspected O.J. Simpson on the morning of the murder, regarded him as a suspect, than I did Robert Shapiro. The judge finds him to be recklessly in disregard of truth for something else. Then he carries around the blood vial. 1.5 centiliters is missing. Then blood shows up on the sock that didn't appear there previously. It has in it EDTA, which is a preservative found not in the human body, but in the tube that was found. Also, an expert testifies that the pattern of blood on the sock was consistent with having been put there when the socks were lying flat, not being worn. Also, the videotape doesn't show the socks where they were supposed to be. Also, Dr. Henry Lee testifies that if the blood on the sock came from the crime scene, it would have had berry juice, it would have had fibers, it would have had hair. Very compelling circumstantial case for police planning, and you as a prosecutor should appreciate that.
The reason you don't want to deal with each issue alone...
We'll deal with my issue now.
Because you cannot deal with each issue alone. So you throw 10 at me, okay? You cannot deal with each one of these issues.
Deal with my issue.
I'm trying to deal with one issue at a time, okay?
The sock. Now
wait a while. I want to talk about the contamination theory first, because there could not have been...
Let me get a break, and then Vince will finish on the contamination. Vince, I got to cover everything.
No, we got to talk about one issue at a time. Ellen doesn't want to talk about one issue at a time because he can't.
We'll be right back with Vincent Bugliosi and Alan Dershowitz on Larry King Live. Chris Darden tomorrow night. Friday night, Mayor Marion Barry. Don't go away. With two of the best in the business, Vincent Bugliosi, the former L.A. County prosecutor, author of the book Outrage, The 5 Reasons Why O.J. Simpson Got Away with Murder. It is published by Norton. And Alan Dershowitz, the former defense attorney for Simpson, Harvard Law School professor, his book recently, Reasonable Doubts, published by Simon & Schuster. Before Vince responds, a couple quick things they do agree on. Alan thinks that Vince is correct, that the biggest mistake was moving this trial downtown. They should have. Gus said he should have kept it out in Santa Monica. So you do agree on a lot of other points.
We agree on a lot of points.
Vincent?
Yeah,
contamination.
On the remaining time that we have left, Alan throws out a blizzard of 10 issues, misstating a lot of facts, by the way, Alan.
Why don't you correct each of them? Why don't you correct each of them?
Okay, well, I have to interrupt you at that point. Why don't you take one issue at a time? I'll deal with any issue that you have, but you throw 10 at me, misstate the evidence on 7 or 8.
Why don't you finish your issue and then give me a couple of minutes on my issue?
Okay, cross-contamination could not have taken place here, all right?
Why not?
I just got through telling you the only person in that lab was Colin Yamauchi.
You're taking him as gospel.
Volunteered. He honestly said he got a small speck of blood on his glove. He didn't have to do that. He didn't have to volunteer that. So if you're going to believe him on that, why not believe him on the rest of his testimony? So what that left you with, I'll tell you what it left your colleagues with. It left your colleagues with the plain contamination theory. But to buy that preposterous allegation, you'd have to accept the proposition that that blood at the murder scene, which was identified as Simpson's by DNA, belonged to the true killer, X, okay? And
or the victims.
No, not the victims.
No, you're wrong.
No,
a PCR
and an RFLP test was done. An RFLP test was done on one of the blood drops, PCR on 4 of the others. So there was DNA there, all right? And it was not the victims. So it had to belong to the killer, and he's X. And during the trial, I guess he's in some motel room, Ellen, in Abilene or Boise or Atlanta, watching the trial.
Of course there was DNA
Wait a while. And because of contamination caused by dirt, bacteria, or the elements, out of the 5.5 billion people on the face of this globe, X's blood was miraculously transformed into Simpson.
That's not the theory.
Just once, but 5 times.
But that's not the theory, Vince. The theory was that the blood that was contaminated was sitting right next to a vial containing the one person's blood who was the defendant.
It was not next to it, Alan. It was on top of a table 15 feet away, wrapped in a paper bindle, which was itself...
That's what one witness who was discredited.
Why would that witness lie?
That's the only one that was there.
Why would the technician lie?
Because otherwise it would be negligence to have the 2 blood samples close to each other and to allow the blood from one to fall into the other.
Vince, are you agreeing that this was a terribly handled case? You are saying that.
Oh, terribly handled by the prosecutors, unbelievably.
But not by the technicians and the others.
They could have done a better job. The LAPD could have done a better job, but they did an adequate job. The DA did an unbelievably incompetent...
But Alan said off the air, what the DA should have done is hired someone like you, or someone in the office, you said that, like Bugliosi, who burrows in. He picked the 2 wrong people. Do you agree? You obviously agree with that.
Oh, my God, yes.
Would you have tried this case if they asked you to come in?
Yes.
You would have.
And there was some suggestion that if there was a retrial, maybe they would have. I don't think it would have happened, but I would have been willing to do it. But I think Ellen will confirm in reading the book that there's just one blunder after another. It's mind-boggling what these people do. It's unprecedented.
I'm glad you didn't do this case for 2 reasons. First, you would have been disbarred. Let me tell you why. You have in your book the following statement. You would have told the judge the following. Judge, you apparently don't know, but that's not the way to talk to lawyers in front of the jury. You were appointed to the bench by a governor because you were a friend of the governor.
You got to give the background on that.
Right. But I just want to read. If you think that your black robe entitles you under the law to treat us disrespectfully in front of this jury, I'm here to inform you you're wrong. I tell you, it takes a lot of guts to say that, but you would have been disbarred.
No, you don't get disbarred for that. I'll tell you what you do. You retain your stature in front of the jury and therefore your credibility. Ito telling the prosecutors, sit down. He would not have done that with me in that courtroom, all right? They should have stood up to him and demanded that he give them the same identical respect that they give him. They should have told him back in chambers that if he continued to humiliate them in front of the jury, he was going to have to pay in kind in front of millions of people in that same jury.
But if he held them in contempt of
court, so what?
But if you were the prosecutor, you would have had to answer my argument. Now, give me a minute to make it, and then you have to answer it.
Wait, okay. But if you're going to give me 6 arguments...
No, just one. One point and answer it.
All right,
good, fine. The police and the prosecutor honestly believe that this defendant was guilty. Right. They did not frame him because he was black. They did not frame him because they didn't like him. What they did was they tampered with some evidence and lied about certain critical facts because they believed he was guilty and and they wanted to see justice done. They lied in the interest of truth in their mind.
What evidence do you have that they tampered with the evidence?
Okay, here's the evidence.
That they tampered with it.
First of all, the glove that was found moist, and you know that every expert will tell you that had that glove lain out there from 11 o'clock at night until 6 in the morning, it would have been bone dry.
May I respond to that? May I respond to that
point? All right, on that point.
May I respond to that point?
What would you have said there?
Number one, you say in your book, and other people have said, there was no dew that night. That's nonsense. That's nonsense. Fung showed up at 7 in the morning, and the grass was wet from the dew. There was dew that night.
He was wrong.
No, he was
wrong. The weather report was
Were you there,
perfect.
Charlie?
No,
were you there, Charlie? All right,
we had the world's most authoritative meteorologists tell us what the conditions were that night.
There was dew that night, and Lang and Van Adder both said that. It was a typical night. They showed up in the morning, it was wet.
Guys, we're really on a roll, but there's something I have to do. We'll take a break and be back with... We'll be back with Bugliosi and Dershowitz. We'll even get a few of your phone calls away. More importantly, I want to thank him for in Lake Elsinore, California. Hello.
Yeah, Mr.
Bugliosi. Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
Lower your television set, ma'am. What's the question?
Yeah.
What's the question?
Yeah. I'd like to know how you would have handled the case differently.
Well, for one thing, I would have presented much, much more evidence. For instance, the suicide note, which just reeks with guilt. Show me an innocent person anywhere charged with murder who would write a note like that. I would have presented all this evidence after the slow-speed chase. I'm talking about the gun that they found on Simpson, and the passport, and the cheap disguise, and several fresh changes of underclothing. I'd have put on his statement where Simpson, his own words, admits dripping with blood on the night of the murders in his car, home, and driveway.
Would you
and they ask him, how did you get cut? He says, I don't know. They ask him again. He says, I have no idea, man. Also, I would have probably put in 400 to 500 hours of preparation into my final summation. These prosecutors were working, preparing their summation the night before they gave it.
Would you have put Furman on, Vince?
Well, of course you have to put Furman on.
No, you don't.
Wait a while. Ellen, Furman was your main case. The lawyers in your case would have gotten him up to that witness stand if they had to carry them up there on a stretcher.
No way.
He was your main case. Ellen, look, before the trial...
Wait a minute, but you're missing the point, Vince. The prosecution should never have put Furman on. They bungled. I wrote in my book about a memo that I wrote to the defense team.
It would have been even worse because it would have looked like he was being hidden.
Let me tell you why it would have been. You were dead wrong about that, and you were right about many things, but you're wrong about that. I wrote in my book, Reasonable Doubts, that I told the defense team that Marcia Clark is too smart. She'll never, ever put Furman on. That would put us in the very difficult position of having to decide whether to call as our witness a racist, an evidence planter, and a liar.
Alan,
that would have been a very hard decision for us.
No, you call him as a hostile witness and you cross-examine him the same way that you did when the prosecution called him.
Believe me, the plaintiff in the civil case will not call Furman as a witness.
Ellen, look, even before the trial started, you people were on your hind legs begging Ito in oral arguments and written briefs to permit you to get into his racism, his use of the N-word. What difference would it make to you if it comes out on cross-examination if the DA calls him, or if you bring it out?
Big difference. Let me answer that question, because Marcia Clark called him as a witness, put her arm around him, coddled him, made it seem like she liked him and agreed with him, and she lost all of her credibility with the jury as the result of that.
I agree with you. She handled it improperly. Well, what I'm saying is that Mark Furman was your salvation, okay? You needed him like fish need water. You're an appellate lawyer, Ellen, and you're a very good one. You're not a trial lawyer. Believe me, they would have gotten him up on that witness stand if they had to carry him up there on a stretcher.
Well, you know, I read more trial transcripts than probably anyone in the world because I do the autopsies on failed criminal trials as an appellate lawyer. Vince, I want to ask you a question. How would you have explained...
The defense loved Furman in this case, all right? They loved him. They couldn't live without him.
Of course we did. Of course we did.
So what difference does it make if
because it would have been more effective if, for the prosecution, if we had to call him.
You wanted to get in that a racist found that glove. You were arguing frame up.
And if you were a defense attorney, you would have done the same thing. I want to ask you, Vince, one question. How would you have explained to the jury the fact that Van Adder carried around with him the blood sample of O.J. Simpson, the blood sample of Nicole Brown, the blood sample of Ron Goldman, all in violation of L.A. standard procedure? How would you have explained it? Answer the question.
One at a time. I'll answer every one of your questions, Alan, but there's no time. Which one do you want me to talk about?
All three.
All three? You're going to interrupt me 10 times before I get into that.
Answer Van Adder.
All right. Van Adder taking what? Taking the...
Taking O.J. Simpson's blood vial back to Rockingham with him.
Just on that one point.
Okay, Ellen, normally you get a DR number, a divisional record number, after the criminalist has collected all the evidence pursuant to a search warrant. That's normally when you get the DR number. Here, in this occasion right here, Fung hadn't yet collected all the evidence pursuant to the search warrant. So what Van Adder did, he brought the vial directly back to Fung, and any detective will tell you that when they turn it over to the criminalist, Alan, in their state of mind...
Why did he take it to O.J. Simpson's house? Why did he have the blood vial of O.J. Simpson with him when he went back to O.J. Simpson's house? Why did he have Nicole Brown Simpson's? Why did he have Ron Brown?
I just got through telling you, Alan, that if he had booked it, he'd have had to give a different item number. Fung had already given item number 1 to the blood found above the door handle.
Why did he take it back with him to O.J. Simpson's house where he allows the suspicion?
It's sequential. They book these items sequentially. He didn't know what the sequential numbers were.
Let me ask you this question, Vince. If you were the prosecutor...
Now you want to go on to a different issue,
If you were the prosecutor and he said to you, by the way, I'd like to take the blood sample myself in my pocket and bring it to O.J. Simpson's house, you would have told him, don't think about doing that.
He didn't take it in his pocket. He took it in a big, large envelope. Alan, listen. Why would Van Adder, if he intended to frame Simpson, why would he take a vial of blood back to Rockingham to frame, as you say, if he knew that when he got back there already were hundreds and hundreds of reporters and members of the media already congregating at Rockingham?
Not inside.
Wait a while.
Not inside.
Wait a while, but you're claiming that the blood was planted outside all over, okay?
No, you're missing. No, please get my point right, Vince. What I'm saying is the sock. No. I'm saying the sock. That the sock had all the indicia of flame.
Now you want to talk about the sock?
To the core of my being.
Vince, he's saying that's where he took the blood, to the sock.
Because the sock blood had EDTA.
And that's not what they argue.
And the only blood that had EDTA on it was the blood on the sock. There was no blood on the sock originally.
You want to talk about that issue right there?
Anise Ashenbach.
I'm going to have
you want to talk about
that?
Alan, you're misstating the evidence constantly, Alan.
I'm going to have Vince respond directly to that point. Vince's book is called Outrage. Alan Dershowitz's is called Reasonable Doubts, and we'll be right back.
To talk about the EDTA. Alan, I don't know if you're fooling anyone else out there, but you're certainly not fooling me by raising 7, 8 issues at a time and misstating the evidence.
Tell me what I misstated. That's a serious accusation, Vince. Tell me what I misstated.
You want to talk about the EDTA right now?
Yeah.
All right, we'll talk about the EDTA, all right? All right. Your own witness, Roger Martz, that's the FBI agent, right?
No, he was a hostile witness.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, so you do call hostile witnesses,
of course,
Alan?
Of course.
Don't get off track.
Okay, all right. Testified that the EDTA found in the socks was extremely low and therefore did not come from the preserved blood. It was extremely low. It would have been 1,000 times higher if it had come from the reference blood.
But you're leaving out the other witness. No, wait a minute. You're leaving. No, that wasn't our testimony. That was hostile testimony. No, our testimony from Dr. Rieger was that if that amount of EDTA had been in the human body, the person would have bled to death. And he is the expert on EDTA in the body. So at the very most, you had a conflict in front of the jury as to whether or not the EDTA could be explained from coming from the body. That conflict resulted in a reasonable doubt.
Alan Readers didn't even conduct his own test. He relied on Martz. So what type of a forensic expert is that?
Well,
he didn't conduct any tests.
He wasn't asked about the test. He was asked about the meaning of that amount of blood. And he's the expert on how much blood the human body could tolerate with EDTA.
Martz is also an expert. He took
Vince, don't accuse me of misstating the evidence, please.
Well, you have.
No, I haven't.
Time and time again.
What you've done is misstated the evidence. You called Martz our witness. He was not our witness. He was the other side's witness.
After another. There's no time to talk on this show.
Vince, are you...
It's a silly little exercise,
Vince,
and all we're being is entertainers for the people who are watching.
Vince,
I want to make a statement about the EDTA. Martz took an EDTA test at his own blood, okay, and found the same low level of EDTA that he found in the socks. Extremely low.
Not under supervision.
That's what he said. He testified to it.
Look, he didn't do it under supervision. He was cross-examined.
So he's lying, too.
Yes.
So they're all lying, right?
No. Only if you... Only a few people were lying. But no, Marx is under investigation by the FBI.
You're accusing all of these people of lying and engaging in a conspiracy.
No.
Alan, wait a while.
I'm accusing three people of lying.
For what you people did in this case, fraudulently injecting race into this case and accusing innocent police officers of framing Simpson.
You haven't answered.
The whole lot of you should have been hogtied and whipped in the town square at noontime.
Now,
you got by with murder.
Vince, now you're getting personal, and you said you wouldn't get personal.
Because you're getting personal, Van Adder. Here's a guy on the force for 28 years, not one citizen complained against him for 28 years. He's about to retire with his wife Rita to his farm in Indiana, and he's going to risk his good name, his pension, and jeopardize his life, because in California, you plant evidence and testify falsely in a capital case, you can get the death penalty yourself.
That is a lie, Vince. Vince, that is a lie.
Section 128.
And it's a lie.
Section 128 is a lie?
$1,000 contribution to the police league if you can demonstrate that you can get the gas chamber in California for testifying falsely. It is in your book. It's a lie.
In a capital case,
Supreme Court.
128.
You're
Section
absolutely
128.
wrong. You're lying. The United States Supreme Court.
Wait a while, Alan.
The United States Supreme Court is
128.
You can't get the death penalty
that's
except for murder.
constitutional. You testify falsely. You testify falsely in a capital case where the person ends up getting executed. You can get the death penalty yourself. 128.
That is false. It is a lie.
We'll be back with our remaining moments.
The whole thing's absurd.
You're lying, Vince.
We'll be back with Vince and Alan, our remaining moments after this. We're going to have about 45 seconds each. Mr. Dershowitz, a closing statement. I'll stop you at 45.
First of all, there's no question that Van Adder committed perjury in what could have been a capital case. The judge found him to have been in reckless disregard of the truth, and I don't think there's a person out there, including Vince Bugliosi, who believes that he told the truth when he said he didn't regard O.J. Simpson as any more of a suspect than he did Robert Shapiro. Second, the United States Supreme Court said that you cannot execute anybody, no matter how serious their crime, unless it is murder. You cannot execute somebody, even if the statute says you can, and many states have that statute. It's unconstitutional. Vince bases much of his book on the assumption in his closing argument that they would have gotten the gas chamber. No judge would have allowed that argument, and he makes many, many other mistakes in his book. I wish he hadn't gotten personal. We had a good debate going until Vince got personal.
Vince, you have a minute.
You got personal by accusing the LAPD of framing.
I'm talking about personal against you.
Okay, wait a while. We'll talk about your book, Alan.
In your book,
wait a while. In your book, you say that no one saw any blood on the back gate that night. That's in your book, okay? There are 5 people that testified to it. Lang, Van Adder, Phillips, Terrazza, and Risky testified.
Not in the police report.
Don't interrupt.
Wait a while. They testified. You said in your book, Alan, for thousands of readers, that no blood was seen on the back gate that night.
It was not in the police report.
That's a lie.
It's not in the police report.
Okay, don't interrupt.
You say in your book...
Read my book and see if that's true.
You say in your book
I'm talking to the public out there. Read my book and see who's telling the truth.
Gentlemen, I'll tell you what we're going to do. Vince is correct. We deserve more time on this. We're going to do more time on this. These are both important gentlemen, and in the 2 important books, Vincent's is just out. It's called Outrage. Alan's is Reasonable Doubts. We're going to arrange more of this because it deserves major attention. Thanks for joining us. Good night.